Okay, we are live. Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best contributors to our independent policy movement for progress to bring power to people like you. With us on the program today, we're going to be speaking with Meg Gorman. She is a congressional candidate out in Tennessee's 3rd District. And so we're going to be looking forward to chatting with her about the upcoming general election she's going to be facing, the prospects of running unopposed in a Democratic primary, and how you focus that time, as well as many other issues in our current event. So everyone, let's start getting into that.
John, I can't hear you.
Okay, there we go. Are we back? Can you hear me now, Meg?
I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Sorry about the technical difficulty. It's a pleasure to have you on the program today. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Yeah, how's it going with you?
It's been rather a stressful day today. We had a lot of chores we had to get through, so it's a pleasure to be able to take the time to get to know you today. And I'd love to hear, first and foremost, before you aspired to run for office, what were you doing that kind of inspired any political involvement in general? What were you working on beforehand, and what were the issues that said, you know what, it's finally time to run?
Sure. So I really spent my whole adult life working in the service industry. I actually went to school to get my degree in hospitality and tourism. That's up in Knoxville, a couple hours away from where I live now. And I moved back here. I live in Chattanooga, which I love. The people here are just phenomenal humans. And so I moved back here, kind of plant my roots. And I worked at an art district for about 4 years. I worked kind of in marketing and community outreach, but always worked with people. And I just continued to talk with people in the communities and hear about their troubles largely with medical bills. That's a recurring one. I know that's not new for anyone. Schooling, hearing about Tennessee wanting to make ketchup a vegetable, again for children. Just all of these things overwhelmingly are affecting families, affecting working families. They're affecting people who are already vulnerable, people who are already marginalized, and that doesn't feel like it fits with the personalities of the people who I know here. People here in East Tennessee have a lot of love for each other, and it just always stuck out to me as odd. I was raised in a family. I'm one of 3 girls. I'm the middle daughter, and my parents always taught me that when I see something wrong, it's my responsibility to do what I can to fix it. If you are walking down the sidewalk and you see a can on the sidewalk, you should pick it up and recycle it, even if you weren't the one who threw it on the ground to begin with. And I've just seen so much wrong, especially over the last few years, and it just built up and built up and built up. And I looked at the person who I'm running against. He's a 5-term Republican incumbent. He votes in line with Donald Trump more than 98% of the time. He has voted against establishing humanitarian standards for people held at our border. He has voted against workplace protections for members of the LGBTQ communities. It's bad. And I've seen all this wrong being done. I looked at him and I thought, man, someone really needs to run against this guy. It's kind of getting close to that deadline. This is the fall and before just last fall. And I thought, man, someone really needs to run. And then I thought, well, why am I expecting someone else to run? Why am I expecting someone else to step up? And so that's really what encouraged me to do that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly love that reasoning. That's why I originally had done that myself. But, no one came in your case. We had other people come in from the district that I felt comfortable endorsing. It's so important that these people who are these long-term incumbents start becoming opposed so that either they get moved on the issues, they have to at least show up to the district and hear the people's concerns. There's so much good that can come out of a run. I'd love to hear specifically what you would be hoping to try and address. Like, what are those key issues that you've been hearing from voters? You mentioned healthcare so far. Has that been particularly because of the coronavirus, or are there other things that have been coming up more recently that you've been hearing from voters?
I mean, just really overall having friends and family who have been unable to afford medications that they rely on.
Sure.
I've known people who were bankrupted from medical bills. I mean, that is a uniquely American issue.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be happening. There's no excuse for it. And so those things in particular, but it extends beyond that. It's not just healthcare. It's really about providing for people in a way that allows them to actually live and not just survive. And I think that that's something that we have been failing at.
Yeah, I think it does need to be much more comprehensive than just like a sick care system where you're just helping people after they've gotten sick. I'd love to hear what is that medical approach that you are trying to help the people get. Is it Medicare for all? Are there other parts of it? What does your plan look like to make Americans and specifically the people of Tennessee healthier?
Yeah, I absolutely support Medicare for all. I think having a single payer system would help significantly. I know that there has been opposition to a lot of this, thinking that we need to have competition. We need to have this. We don't. Other countries have shown us that this is a doable thing. But even on top of that, right now, like you said, we have people who are only seeking medical help once they are ill. In many cases, they're only seeking medical attention once they are very, very, very sick. I know, I mean, I'm 28. There have been times when I have thought maybe I need to go to the doctor, and I didn't, because I thought, it's really not worth the medical bill. And I have insurance. I have coverage, Blue Cross Blue Shield, through my employer. And even with that, everything is so expensive. To me, it's like, man, is it worth, knowing that minimum few $100s just for a doctor to tell me that I just need to go home and sleep.
I've been there myself as well. And you know what? I now only recently turned 26 myself. So now it's fully on myself to pay these bills. I have to ask you, how have you been trying to take this conversation around Medicare for all in this area that's kind of reddish, purplish in nature? How have you been trying to broach that with those types of voters? Obviously, everyone knows healthcare is a problem. Like, there's a reason it's kind of bipartisan. But have you been trying to frame it any differently because of the district you're trying to run in?
No, I'm very candid with people. I'm a firm believer in being transparent and forthcoming, but the way I approach it is generally a lot of these issues we agree on, regardless of who we are or what party we're part of. There are a lot of issues we agree on, and what we don't agree on is how to get there. And so I feel pretty confident that we would like to live in a country where people, when someone feels like they may need to see the doctor, that person is able to go see a doctor, that person is able to go get medical attention and not drain their life savings. It's pretty straightforward. And so starting it from that way, it's saying, what we're doing, we've done things in the past that have been steps in the right direction, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And we need to take bigger steps. We need to be comfortable. We need to be willing to accept this risk. We're willing to spend money on all of these other things. We're willing to take risks in all these other areas. We're willing to, continue to bail out huge industry giants and corporations. So why aren't we willing to invest in something like this?
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty straightforward. And when we frame it like that, we spend a lot of money on all these other things. Why not something as foundational as healthcare? That's hard to argue with. And I think people agree on that.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you on it being kind of like a common sense economic approach that these people can kind of understand. They understand that they're being drained by these companies. I'd love to understand in your perspective, like what the path forward to having something like Medicare for All is. I'm sure you're aware the recent platform that the Democratic Party had reviewed and voted upon rejected Medicare for All. We still have a large ways to go. What do you think is the best way to even get the leadership on board? What's keeping this back? Because when you look at the polling, it's a pretty bipartisan issue, both Republicans and Democratic voters enjoying it. What do you think is the problem that's keeping us from getting it from either group's leadership?
I think that there are a couple of things at play. I think private insurers have definitely come into the fold way more than they ever should. And we see this not just with health insurers. We see this with different corporations, with different industries throughout, where our legislation is slowly being more and more and more easily manipulated by companies, by for-profit groups. And frankly, I think that has a lot to do with it. I think that there are also small groups where when you can associate with a single group who has a stake in this. So for example, physicians, and you can say, well, this group of physicians over here doesn't like this because right now Medicare doesn't pay out as it should. It is very difficult to do this. However, a lot of the backing for that, when people say, well, I'm a doctor, I went to school, it took a ton of my time, my life, my money. It cost me, I have $500,000 in student loan debt, and that is used as a defense, and rightfully so, because that is a lot to invest. But I think if we can remove that financial component and even use that to help doctors, because this is a service. Doctors are providing a service just like social workers and caregivers and teachers. And so if we can say, if you are going to be a part of this system, there would be obviously a few specifically elective surgeries or, what's considered unnecessary cosmetic surgeries that may be excluded from this. But generally, if you are going to be a part of this system for at least 10 years, then the government will pay for your higher level education and your actual medical degree. And we see that right now with ROTC and military service in colleges where you serve for a certain amount of time. So we do that for military and colleges where they'll have that paid for, but we're not, and we'll do that obviously if you're a doctor, military, but we don't see that as much with physicians just who are serving generally. Mm-hmm. And instead we saddle them with a massive amount of student loan debt, and then they are paid massive amounts. Now, of course, not always. And I do think that physicians obviously are highly skilled. It requires a ton of training. It requires liability. There's a lot that comes with it. So it's not to say that they shouldn't be paid fairly. They should definitely be paid fairly for the work that they do. It is hugely important. But I do feel like in many of those areas, it is very excessive, and that could come down some and make things much more affordable overall. So I think that that's a step when we can get everyone on board. And that being said, I've talked with a pretty large number of doctors here and there over the past few years just to kind of get feedback and hear. And the overwhelming majority have been in support of this, and all of them have said the same thing, which is, this is one thing I have a little hesitation about, but at the end of the day, we need healthcare. Like, people need it. We'll figure that part out. So I think, slowly lowering that age for Medicare, making sure that that's coming in, and then phasing that, I think is really good. I know folks have had a plan for that. I don't necessarily think that there is a sudden better way that would be more effective. But I think the influence of the healthcare lobby, specifically insurers, I think that's big, because that's really what it's replacing. It's not replacing our healthcare system. It's replacing our insurance.
So I think that makes a very clear case on like the arguments wise. I think now it's kind of like how do we kind of reverse the political power? As you said, these insurance companies, drug companies, they're the ones that are doing lobbyist work right now to try and keep that for-profit model in place, which is why neither party is listening to their voter bases that say they want these more universal models. What do you think we need to be doing in terms of democracy reform to combat this special interest group?
Ooh, a lot. I think, obviously, we need to remove the influence of groups who are profiting off of certain legislation. And that's a lot. I feel very strongly that we need to abolish super PACs. We need to end the influence of corporate lobbies. And frankly, any direct lobbying, that should not be a part of a functioning democracy. But I think we also need to make democracy accessible. We need to make this something that is true democracy, and that it is accessible to people the way that we as Americans define democracy, which may not be in the traditional sense, but the way we think of it as, this is something that we all have access to. This is, it is everyone voting. It is everyone having the right to vote. It is everyone being able to engage, run to represent their district or their state or their country. And right now, money is a barrier to entry. And an even larger issue than that is when we talk about people who are most in need of real, meaningful representation, those are the people who are least able to overcome that barrier.
Yeah.
And that means people who are having to work 2 or 3 jobs to get by, people who are having to balance, a full-time job while being a single parent. There are all these different factors, and those people aren't able to run for office. Those people often aren't able to take off time to go vote. And we say, well, people get, they get 3 hours to vote here, and it's no biggie, just take off work. It's like, it's not paid. So if you're someone who's living paycheck to paycheck, if you're thinking about the cost of dinner, 3 hours, that can be the difference between eating or not eating for a few days. And that's not an option that should be on the table. That shouldn't even be something that we're considering. So I would like to see publicly funded elections. I would like to see us lowering that personal contribution or individual contribution limit. And we've seen some places do this, but with the voucher program, not for schools, but with as Yang called it, democracy dollars. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an excellent idea. I think when we do that, we level the playing field. And I think we would also see people running who we may not see with our current system. That means more diversity in our candidate pools, more diversity in our elected officials.
Yeah, because I think that's really what we do want in diversity as well, is that's, socioeconomic as well, because you need some kind of cash balancing. Because I think when you look at elections, sadly right now, 91% of elections are just decided by who has more money. And so we have to kind of tip the scales in the working class's favor. One thing I'd love to ask you is, how would you be trying to bring accessibility and that transparency to the people? Like, a lot of people have this concern. They love people. They get them elected the first time. They're coming in with promises and kindred spirit to them, but then they get grinded down by the system. How do you keep that trust between voters? How have you been trying to do it in your campaign?
Yeah. So much of it is that, and I actually, when I first hired my campaign manager, we had a meeting and over the phone, and we went over very basic deal breakers. And my deal breakers are, you have to be kind. You have to be transparent. There's no twisting of a headline, twisting of a quote, taking things out of context. It needs to be that, we can provide a full thing and then talk about it, but we're not going to twist words. We're not going to take things out of context and claim something meant something that it clearly did not. And I remember when I told my campaign manager this, I said, and no canned questions. She said, what? And I said, no canned questions. And she said, well, I mean, she said, I understand where you're coming from, but you understand, like, this is pretty standard for every campaign. Not that I'm encouraging you to do it, but often it gives you a platform to talk about something that is important and that will connect with voters, but they may not know to ask about.
Mm.
And
it's transparent when you don't have kind of actors in the crowd. I think that's just a right thing to do. Like, you should know that every question is an actual voter's concern.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. And my response to that is there are going to be times when I might have people asking me questions and I might not be able to talk about what I wanted to talk about. But that's okay, because I'm not there to talk about the things I want to talk about. I'm there to talk about the things that the people are asking me about, what they want to talk about. That's the whole reason I'm there. I can hold a whole event based on the things that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to tell people to show up and listen to me, and I'm going to take questions and then have people asking me what my favorite flavor of ice cream is. So
what is your favorite flavor, though? I think that is important for voters.
That's really different. I actually really like peppermint stick, but it's kind of difficult to find during the summertime. I know.
Yeah. So, back to that point you were making beforehand of like actually caring about what they want to hear, what they're trying to get from you. I'd love to hear what you try to strike as that philosophical balance between, representing the voters and what they think on an issue compared to you're going to have some of your own beliefs. How do you try and strike that balance of who wins out, the voters or what you think is right for the people?
Sure. So one thing I feel very, very strongly about is we are really, as a community, as a state, as a country, we're only as strong as our most vulnerable. We are only as free as the most oppressed. And with that in mind, if someone is pushing for a certain policy, if they say, this is what I want to see, we can't just take that as, okay, this is what one voter wants, or this is what 50% of the voters want. Is this going to be damaging to the people of this district? And the answer should never be yes when you're moving forward on something. It's one thing to move forward on a piece of legislation or, fighting for something where, maybe one side is in favor and one side's in opposition, or where people are divided or where people are uncertain. But if you can look at that and look at what you're pushing for and say, it's going to hurt this group of people, then that's really not okay.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. That's part of the reason why we do have some form of a representative model compared to pure direct democracy, is this kind of respect for minority rights And so I think you're absolutely right. There is this kind of weighing process. And I think the best model is kind of as you're espousing, listen to them. They can have legitimate points that makes you reconsider your position. But at the end of the day, you are responsible because you've been enshrined with that, responsibility as a representative to do what's best for the people from your own analysis. So I wholeheartedly agree with you there. The last thing I'd love to ask you about before going to my fans' questions here is, we've been going through a lot of the platform things that we have here at the Hill of Roses, democracy reform, kind of universal basic services like healthcare. But one I'd love to ask you about is the idea of universal basic income. Is this something that you would support yourself, either during this coronavirus crisis or even beyond?
Absolutely, and both, now and beyond. I think that this is something that is thanks to Andrew Yang. Obviously, it existed before Andrew Yang, but he really brought this in to 2020. He really brought this into a modern age and made it popular. And we went from maybe having a story here or there on it, kind of sprinkled throughout, like an opinion piece somewhere, to now this is being talked about. It is actually being discussed and being taken seriously, which is wonderful. And right now we have a system where everything is qualified. Everything is conditional. Everything is, do you qualify for this? Do you qualify for X, Y, or Z? Well, you have to make below this threshold, or you can't have a job and earn over this much. And in doing that, it's creating this odd dynamic. And I don't know why we ever expected anything different, because it is a recipe for that. Where people have the option of, okay, so I can get assistance this way, but if I do just if I'm working more, then suddenly I lose that. And
a little bit of a trap there when it has disincentive. I think that's been a complaint that a lot of people on the conservative side of the aisle have been raising during this crisis around the unemployment insurance. They've been claiming people are refusing to go back to work because it's just too much. Well, if it was a universal basic income, you can just keep that money and work as normal. I think that's a huge point indeed. What differences would you try to have in a universal basic income, if any, compared to a plan like Andrew Yang's Freedom Dividend?
Honestly, probably not that many. And it's been a bit since I've read up on it. I know that he had touched on the fact that it would replace a couple of the current programs, not all of them. But I think that he did really well in framing that. And in part of the reason why I think this is so important, and I think he resonated this, was this program helps to remove that social stigma of people saying, oh, well, you're getting this assistance, or, oh, you're on welfare. And
kind of hard to call people welfare queens when we're all getting the welfare.
Exactly. And that shouldn't be something that comes with like a badge of shame. That should not at all. And so I do think that's really important. Now, as far as the exact amount proposed, that's something I would want to look at, bearing in mind that I also support several other programs, paid parental leave, government funded childcare, a lot more. And so I don't know that necessarily go with that exact number. And frankly, I don't have an exact number to give you now, but I imagine it wouldn't be too far off. But I do think that it would help round everything out, and just make sure that way we can say, it doesn't matter who you are or what you look like. This is something that you get because you're a part of this community. You're a part of this country. You are here You are living here. You are going to the grocery store. You are raising a family here, or you're working here, whatever it may be. If you are here as a part of the community, you are contributing. And I think that, plus lending that level of security to people, especially who are in unconventional jobs, who might do gig work, who are independent contractors, I think that's really important. I think it helps allow those people to pursue their passions. I think it makes losing a job less traumatic. Right now, it's when someone loses a job, they lose their livelihood. They're terrified. I mean, we hear stories about, white suburban men who lose their jobs and are devastated, and it leads them to attempt suicide. We hear stories about this a lot. I mean, there's so much pressure on people to do this. And so when we can help and say, no one should feel like their lives are ending because they lose a job, I think that would help.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I'm very happy to hear that you do support it. It would really help us unshackle ourselves from this workism that defines us. It's not healthy for a society when we say 80% of people hate their jobs. And so I think universal basic income, kind of giving you that flexibility to turn down an abusive work situation, is super important as well. So Meg, thank you so much for supporting that, as well as answering my questions. Let's go to a couple of questions from the audience. The first question I have here comes from the Falcone General. This is a pretty good tactical question. It's simply, what is the plan to flip this district? What are you trying to actively do as a campaign to reach voters?
Sure. So, and I guess I should have told you about the district, but this district, it's in East Tennessee. The most populous county is Hamilton County, which has Chattanooga in it. But it's about 10 and a half counties. And Hamilton County makes up about half the population of the entire district. It goes all the way from the Georgia border up to the Kentucky border, and it's shaped like an hourglass. At one point in the middle, it is only a mile wide. And so it is difficult and it is challenging, but we've also seen this area, our voter turnout has historically been very, very, very poor. And we're seeing a lot of younger people. We're seeing a lot of minorities. We're seeing a lot of folks who haven't voted in the past, or they haven't voted in a while, who are coming back in, who are enthusiastic, who are excited, who are ready to go. And so a lot of it is about engaging with those voters who maybe haven't felt that they had a reason to vote in the past, but now they do. Oh, that's a core component. Another is people are fed up with our current representative. His name is Chuck Fleischman. Like I said, he's been in his position for 5 terms now, 10 years, and he actively avoids going out in public unless there is a ribbon cutting. He avoids his constituents in public. He will not show up unless it is for a photo op or it is for an event where he can get money from a donor. And there are people who will literally cross the aisle, who are staunch Republicans, who will cross the aisle and vote against him because they dislike him so, so much. And granted, that is not the majority of them, but those people exist. I mean, people are really, really fed up. So we have those 2 factors at play. And the second one, largely been talking with, with people whenever we have the chance, letting them know, this isn't about me running so I can represent Democrats in District 3. This is about getting real representation for the people of District 3. I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're Democrat. I don't care if you are conservative, liberal, libertarian, progressive, whatever. You deserve real representation. And I'm running to represent you. that's a piece of it. And with the other, I've had a lot of volunteers show up. I've had people reach out who are really excited. We've actually had a team of of young, I would say young adults, but of old kids, young adults, I guess somewhere in the middle, like 14 or so years old, who are really excited and who are really politically active and who can't even vote yet, who have formed their own groups, who are making calls to voters because they're like, this is our future. This is we can't vote right now, so we have to do something because we can't let this go on because we're going to inherit this and it's bad. So yeah, we've had a lot of support, and there have been folks just from all backgrounds who are wanting change, who are jumping in, who are making calls, and working really hard to get younger people to turn out and vote.
Yeah, it's good to hear that you're not taking any group for granted. Both the people that can't cast votes yet, they still deserve to be heard, and they can be valuable sources of volunteers as well. You can't judge a Republican that's not going to convert. Of course, you're going to need them in this district that's going to have to flip. And likewise, it goes through the whole gamut, liberal, progressive, all the same. So I wholeheartedly agree with that approach. Let's go with our next voter who had kind of a concern on that subject themselves. They had a whole explanation about their background being on the more conservative side, a little bit of an older voter. They boiled down their question to, I guess what I'm asking is, can someone like yourself, Miss Gorman, ensure that older Democrats like them will still matter to you and that our ideas and values will be taken into consider instead of being drowned out? Like, how do you try to have this divide between making progress, which is frankly a lot of what this younger coalition has been having, compared to what the older coalition has been having, which has been iterate, build on top of what we already have. We have the ACA. Let's keep building that. How have you been trying to reach out to older voters and bring them into your coalition?
Sure. So much of it, and like we said before, so much of it is that there is significant overlap between these. And it should go without saying that every voice matters. Every vote matters. Every person matters. And there should not be a step taken that is going to hurt or disenfranchise an entire group of people. And right now, we are seeing attempts at that over and over and over again. Specifically, we have seen attempts to cut Social Security. And that is something, even though we have a lot of younger people who may not talk about it that often, that is hugely important. Okay. And frankly, if you give it 50 years, they'll be talking about it then. This is a collective effort. This is something for all of us. And it shouldn't just be serving one group. It shouldn't just be serving people who are 28, who are women who have freckles, and are named Meg. This is about everyone having representation. And that means being accessible. That means being accessible, being out in the community, not for photo ops, but actually to listen and hear what is needed. And it's about being able to say, if you are not happy with what I'm doing, tell me. If I will always put the people of Tennessee's 3rd District before myself. And if ever that is not how a constituent feels, then that's something that I need to be able to explain. And that's something that I need to be able to fix. We've had a lot of damage done to the public trust with our current administration, with our current representative. And we've had representatives, but really this representative who profits off of his constituents when they get sick. He takes money from big tobacco. And so I understand that there has been a lot of wrong done. And I understand that it can take time to rebuild trust that has been broken. But I am ready for that. I am ready for that. I am prepared to to meet with anyone and everyone who is interested. I will hear the opinions. I will hear the feedback. I want people to realize that they have a voice. They have someone who will listen. They have someone who will represent them. That's what they'll get.
I think that's so important to be heard. And you know what? Sometimes it is just taking these ideas that have seemed so progressive and framing them how they are common sense, as you were talking about beforehand, and help these groups like the older individuals. A universal basic income, for example, as we were talking about beforehand, is like the biggest boost Social Security has ever had. It'd be great to help these older populations actually be able to retire and have an extended Medicare for all compared to what the existing Medicare is. So I think they're so important as a voter base, especially for progressives like ourselves, to try and reach out to hear their concerns and address them appropriately. We have one more question here I'd love to go to. The Falcone General asks, for yourself, what do you think about the Marquita Bradshaw race? And I'd love to extend that to just how have you been feeling about other races that have been going along in Tennessee so far? Has there been anyone you've been trying to reach out to or work with that is also running for office? And I'll answer the second part. Am I going on to Storyfire? I'll look into it. I haven't heard of that platform beforehand. But I'd love to hear your opinion, Meg. Is there any races you've been keeping your eye on? Because as you said, you didn't get opposed in this primary, so other people were going through that process. Was there anyone you were looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. And Marquita in general, or specifically, I guess I should say, is phenomenal. It's funny, you should ask, I actually just got off the phone with her a couple hours before this. And that is something really, really interesting that I have seen as I've been running is there is this excitement and compassion between all of the candidates who are running for House, or I should say all the Democratic ones. And it has been really cool. We actually did an event last night, and it was just kind of like a little pregame before the convention talks, and we had a bunch of folks on there, and that was really wonderful. And when I got off, Blair running in District 1, she reached out to me, and right afterwards, Erica running District 7, she reached out to me, and I talked with her on the phone for like half an hour, and there is a real sense of camaraderie. It's definitely a united movement. It is a bunch of people who all care. They are running. It is difficult. And each person is bringing their own personality into it. And it is a group effort. And one of the things I talked about with Marquita is she talked about, hey, I want to come through. I want to be able to meet. I want to, be in this area. She obviously knows about the area. She knows about the district, but just really lending her support, saying, I'm here if you need anything at all. And it's been really incredible. So I've been overwhelmed just by the amount of support and compassion that I have seen from these other candidates. And it's really interesting to me because it feels like while I'm looking at these other candidates across the aisle where it seems like it is, again, for photo ops, it is, just to say on paper, I have this endorsement. And we have to come together in order to keep things divided. And this is a bunch of people who could probably get away without really touching base with one another, but that's not at all the case. They are all coming together. Everyone's making an effort, even just to check in and see how things are going. Hey, how can I help? Hey, we should, let's do this together. Oh, hey, I saw you on this. You did great. You're wonderful. And it's just been really incredible. So I would say I'm very, very, very excited that Marquita will be running for Senate against Bill Hagerty. She is absolutely phenomenal. I am quite excited to see her and to support her however I can.
Oh, that's great to hear. I wholeheartedly agree that it's a very special feeling when you have that coalition building where, especially in your area where a lot of these seats have been held red, you need that kind of coalition to kind of support each other because it's hard to do all these movements just as individuals. You need to be working together. So it's very encouraging to hear that. And I love Marquita, especially it's inspirational how big of a money disadvantage she overcame because you know what? Like, at the end of the day, you're right. It's about listening to the voters, not just speaking at them with money supply. That at the end of the day is going to matter. And likewise, just a shout out to Blair Walsingham. Love her, had her on the program many a time, and we're so thankful that she came on. So it's great to hear that you have a coalition out there in Tennessee. With that being said, Meg, thank you so much for answering both my and my audience's questions. Is there anything that you want people to be able to do to be able to support your campaign at this time? We were talking strategy beforehand. How can the people that have heard what you said today and liked what you had to say get involved? We have your website scrolling across the bottom of the page.
Yeah, I saw that. I like the website scrolling. That's wonderful.
Got to keep people constantly aware of how they can get involved. Like you never know. It's like one moment, it's like, okay, I'm in.
Well, I would absolutely love to have any and all of you join me in this fight. It is a big one. It is hugely important to get Chuck Fleischman out. He is, I call the termite of representatives, and that he is silent and goes unnoticed, and that makes him incredibly dangerous. And meanwhile, he is doing a lot of damage. So if you'd like to join me, you can visit my website at meg2020.com. There's an option to contact where you can sign up to volunteer. It doesn't matter if you're in Tennessee, 3rd District, or you're out in California or Wyoming, wherever you may be, you can still volunteer. We have phone banking, we have contactless literature drops, we have letter writing. Even if you think that none of those sound interesting and you have another skill that you'd like to offer, we would absolutely love to have you, and you can do that there. And then with Chuck Fleischman, he does have his self-proclaimed war chest of $1.5 million. So if you are in a position to donate and you feel inclined to do so, you can also donate on my page there as well.
Okay. Well, Meg, it was a pleasure getting to be able to meet you today and be able to hear about what you're fighting for and what your background was. We wish you the best of luck in the days ahead, and we hope to bring you back sometime. We have a lot to talk about on that childcare issue. I avoided going down the rabbit hole because, oh boy, that could be a long conversation, and it is so important. There is more that we have to do than just universal basic income, but we wish you well and have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. So everyone, that was Meg Gorman. We want to thank her again for coming on to the program today to be able to talk about her campaign. We're going to be continuing to work out, seeing if we can avoid these kind of technical difficulties where the video starts lagging out. But we appreciate everyone who stuck around to be able to listen to today's interview. We are hoping everyone had a good time listening to her campaign. Again, you can go to meg2020.com to be able to learn more. With that being said, tune in again Monday next week, 9 p.m. Eastern time. That's when we're always live. With that being said, everyone, I hope you guys are, again, staying safe out there. I love you all for tuning in today. And as always, I hope you guys stay rosy.